Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
I know this is disappointing for people.
No grocery rebate and a freeze on hiring in the public service. The BC government makes some major changes ahead of its budget amid Donald Trump's tariff threats.
Obviously concerned that if frontline positions are not filled, that it's actually going to hurt our ability to maintain and grow the economy.
Plus,
this isn't just about public safety. This is a humanitarian crisis.
Vancouver's mayor and police chief launch a new crackdown on organized crime and disorder on the downtown Eastside. The cost and concerns.
On the one hand, the mayor's saying, we need mandatory care, but on the other hand, he's saying no new supportive housing. So what does that mean?
And
we have made the decision as a council to terminate the project at Canby and Sexsmith.
Richmond City Council says no to a controversial supportive housing project after the province said yes twice.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. If you were counting on a grocery rebate promised by the province, listen up. BC's finance minister says Donald Trump's tariff threats have forced it to cancel a key election pledge and put a hiring freeze on the public service. As Katie DeRosa reports, critics argue the government is using the U.S. president as an excuse to break promises it never intended to keep.
It won't be in the budget.
The threat of looming tariffs has forced the NDP government to renege on a key election promise. That's the $1,000 grocery rebate, which would have benefited about 90% of British Columbians. BC's finance minister says it's one casualty of the tariffs being proposed by U.S. President Donald Trump.
It is something that we wanted to do and something that we were working on. But that was a moment in time before an unpredictable person was in the White House and threatened our jobs.
The grocery rebate would have cost the government $1.8 billion. The BC Conservatives say the NDP government is looking for a scapegoat for their financial mismanagement.
You only have to go back to the election where David Eby was routinely mocking what the BC Conservatives and we were saying in terms of bringing in slowly tax cuts and tax relief for British Columbians as we could afford it. Instead, he tried to make it sound like they had a plan to put money immediately in your pocket. The second the election was over, he was looking for ways to renege on those types of promises.
Bailey also announced a hiring freeze among all public service employees. The exception is government employees who deliver core programs and services like social workers and correctional officers.
We're obviously concerned that if frontline positions are not filled, that it's actually going to hurt our ability to maintain and grow the economy and also to meet the threat presented by this trade conflict.
The hiring freeze does not impact public sector workers like teachers or nurses. Bailey says she has no plans to delay rolling out the budget, which will be presented on March 4th, the same day that Trump's sweeping tariffs are set to take effect. Katie DeRosa, CBC News, Victoria.
Meanwhile, more than 1,000 unionized LifeLabs staff could walk off the job across this province by Sunday.
They're seeing a massive wage disparity with workers doing essentially the same work in hospitals. And we've heard some real horror stories from our members who are working at LifeLabs.
The BC General Employees Union says the 72-hour strike notice follows months of negotiations. It wants wages and benefits to come into line with cost of living pressures and for chronic understaffing to be addressed. Workers are planning to hold a one-day strike kickoff rally on Sunday in Burnaby. LifeLabs was bought last year by the U.S. health giant Quest Diagnostics. Vancouver's mayor and police chief have announced a long-term plan to crack down on organized crime and disorder in the city's most troubled neighborhood. As Chad Pawson explains, it's part of Ken Sim's vision for the future of the downtown east side.
Vancouver Mayor Ken Sim, flanked by his fellow councillors and members of the city's police force, vowing to clean up and reorder Vancouver's downtown east side, a place he says is plagued by social disorder and rampant crime.
Here's the reality. Achieving it doesn't happen by chance. It requires decisive action, putting egos aside, and a lot of strategic investment. And that's exactly what we're delivering on.
The plan has a name, Task Force Barrage. It aims to flood more police officers into the DTES's 4 square kilometers, where nearly 60 already patrol, and further target organized crime. VPD says they're also looking to increase foot patrols in the area. Vancouver's top cop says it's all about making the area more safe for residents.
We're not here to target everyday residents of the downtown Eastside community. And we're not here to target people that happen to be struggling with addiction issues, and especially those who are living with complex mental health issues. That's not our goal.
Task Force Barrage is meant to be long-term. It has no end date, but will need an extra $5 million in the police budget. That budget was approved with extra funds just 2 months ago and already uses up 20% of city revenues. Ken Sim says Task Force Barrage is the first part of his vision for the downtown east side, with a motion to pause new net supportive housing there expected at the end of the month. Chad Pawson, CBC News, Vancouver.
Green Party councillor Pete Fry, meanwhile, says while tackling organized crime is a worthwhile goal, he's concerned about the rollout of Task Force Barrage.
And I do worry that there's a lack of sort of a proactive approach here. This is a very reactive approach, and of course, you know, we want to address criminal activities. We want to address gangs and predators in the downtown east side. But we also have, you know, on the one hand, the mayor's saying, you know, we need mandatory care, but on the other hand, he's saying no new supportive housing. So what does that mean? Are we talking about mass incarceration for people? Are we shipping them out of the city?
Fry says he's not criticizing the police approach, but argues not enough is being done to meet the needs of people who live in the neighborhood. The future of a controversial supportive housing project in Richmond is in limbo again after City Council revoked its blessing. It was to be built near Aberdeen Centre, but has drawn strong opposition from some residents. Our Liam Britton joins us with more. Liam, remind us what this project is and why it's faced such hurdles.
Hurdles indeed, Dan, with politics no small one. This project is a 90-unit supportive housing complex. It was going to be permanent housing and replace 2 temporary sites in Richmond, but a number of residents raised concerns about safety and drug use. So the NDP paused the project just before last fall's provincial election. And then last week, the province announced it had looked at 5 alternate sites, but none of them worked. So it's back to the original site at Sexsmith and Cambie. But now Richmond's mayor says the city is revoking its approval. Malcolm Brody claims the province flip-flopped on the location before the election, angering residents and making the project untenable.
We hope that our announcement today sends a clear message that supportive housing and housing for our vulnerable residents must be provided in an acceptable location with due process.
Liam, what does the province have to say about this now?
Well, Housing Minister Ravi Kahlon says he is disappointed. He notes the 2 temporary sites the project would have replaced have leases that expire in 2 years.
And that means we're going to have 90 people that potentially could be sleeping in encampments or sleeping in front of businesses in the community. And I know the community has said that to us, that that's not safe for anyone. And so we'll wait for the City of Richmond to come forward with an alternative location, but time is ticking.
Now, Mayor Brody is not ruling out extending those leases, but has said he thinks it will be hard to find suitable alternate locations. He stresses the city does want to help vulnerable people, but the next steps are up to the province, Dan.
All right, Liam Britton, thanks very much. First, there was the snow dump, now the salt dump. Roads and sidewalks in Metro Vancouver have been blanketed with road salt to prevent ice from forming. It's no secret, though, it's bad for pets, tires, and the environment. Our Johanna Wagstaff explains why we're still using it.
Are you wondering why cities are still using salt, even after all the ruined boots, cars, bridges, impacts to ecosystems? The answer is it's cheap. Compared to alternatives, it costs next to nothing, and it works. Salt essentially lowers the freezing point of water by shoving in between water molecules to stop them from forming solid ice crystals. As long as there's at least a bit of water on the road and temperatures are above minus 15 degrees Celsius, some studies have shown salt has reduced car accidents by up to 88% during and after a snow event. But there are major drawbacks. Namely, salt is corrosive. Because salt molecules attract moisture, when it gets into metal, it speeds up the process of oxidization and things rust faster. Things like cars, trucks, concrete, bridges. It's even been cited as a cause for the crumbling infrastructure of Toronto's Gardiner Expressway. But the biggest issue is environmental. There is a growing body of research that has found when salt dissolves and washes away, it can accumulate in rivers and streams. Ultimately, those higher concentrations of chloride ions can be toxic to aquatic wildlife. And messing with ecosystems has huge potential consequences for our industries and for the environment. So why haven't we switched to something else, like sand? Many northern Canadian cities where temperatures are too cold for salt are already using a mix of fractured rock and sand. It works. And as a bonus, it can be scooped back up into a storage facility at the end of the season and reused again next year. Or how about beet brine? It isn't corrosive or toxic, smells great, and works to minus 20 degrees Celsius. There's also leftover vodka from distilleries, cheese brine, even tomato juice that have been experimented with, but it's just not as cheap as salt. In an average winter, Canadians drop 7 million tons of salt, and all those alternatives are 6 to 20 times as expensive as salt. At the end of the day, it really comes down to finding a balance. Many cities are experimenting with a beet or sand brine mixture, pre-wetting surfaces, and using just enough salt to keep roads safe while minimizing impact. So salt is probably here to stay. That is, until the day the cost of the corrosion outweighs the cost of the salt. And depending on how deep you go on secondary impacts, that's likely already happening.
We have a correction to note on our program. Last Thursday, February 6th, CBC News broadcast a video about the diversion of safe supply that included file images taken inside a London drugs outlet. In fact, the story does not involve London drugs. The images have been removed from our story online as well as the video. The former Kamloops Indian Residential School has now been designated a National Historic Site. The facility made global headlines in May of 2021 when the Tk'emlúps-te Nation shared that preliminary findings from a ground-penetrating radar survey had found some 200 potential unmarked graves on the institution's grounds. The CBC's Jennifer Norwell got an inside look at the former school with the chief of the Tk'emlúps-te.
Since 2021, the former Kamloops Indian Residential School has been a place where many people have gathered to reflect on the continuing impacts of residential school system. Now, 4 buildings here on the grounds have been marked as a National Historic Site by Parks Canada. The designation was made after months of consultation between Tk'emlúps-te and the federal department.
So right now we're standing right in front of the Kamloops Indian Residential School, and now it's nationally recognized.
Tk'emlúps made national headlines in May of 2021 when the nation said they had found around 200 possible burial sites on the grounds of the former school. They have not yet unearthed those sites. This kicked off a national discussion around the harms of residential schools, eventually prompting a visit from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and a commitment to build a healing centre.
My grandmother attended the residential school, and same with my mother. They're both, no longer here. And I also have siblings who've also, attended this residential school. And, I know that they all have their story, their history.
It was inside this building, now known as the Chief Louis Centre, that children attended classes, slept, and visited the building's small chapel. That chapel space has now been renovated and turned into a community meeting place.
Our community, with the leadership, wanted to reclaim the lands, but also reclaim the school. I think this here whole side was all for the boys side. And so these were different rooms and dorms.
Now the infrastructure's aging and renovations are in the works for some of the buildings, but in a way that's mindful of the history inside and outside of the buildings. Tk'emlúps wants to update it in a way that's healthy and safe for the community.
Recognizing the school is a much more complex recognition of Canada's history and its relationship with Indigenous people. I just hope that declaring it a heritage site means that it will be protected in memoriam so that we do not lose sight of the checkered past we have.
While Tk'emlúps-te embarks on marking this new designation, there is still ongoing work following the revelation of possible burial sites on the grounds.
There's that much history that has taken place and much records still to go through. Those records are not kept in any one place, so there's still a lot of research that is still taking place to this day. So looking at a timeline, I find it very difficult to be able to provide one at this time.
While that work continues within Tk'emlúps, the nation is also working to get new signage to reflect the site's new designation.
I want people to come and to learn and to educate themselves the importance and significance of truth and reconciliation.
Jennifer Norwell, CBC News, Kamloops.
As tariff threats intensify south of the border, more and more Canadians are showing their national pride. What one local flag maker is noticing after this. Speculation over an early federal election call is swirling as Liberal leadership hopefuls continue to campaign. Mark Carney has been making stops here in BC, and as Mira Baines reports, he did not rule out an early trip to the polls if he wins next month.
Mark Carney's latest stop in Vancouver, a modular housing complex to talk about affordable housing. But he faced questions about a possible election call as early as March 10th, the day after Liberal members decide if he takes over as their new leader.
You never take a decision before you need to take a decision. And so nothing is pre-wired. Let's see what the situation is in the middle of March and do what is best for Canadians.
He didn't rule out a snap election.
If Parliament needs to be recalled for certain reasons, it will be. If it makes sense to get a strong mandate at that point, that is what will follow.
He held meet and greets in North Vancouver and Kelowna this week. His supporters would like you to believe Carney mania is spreading. It comes as Canada deals with the threat of U.S. tariffs, now delayed until next month, and repeated musings from the U.S. President Donald Trump for Canada to become his country's 51st state. Former finance minister and leadership candidate Chrystia Freeland has had tough talk for Trump.
If you force our hand, we will inflict the biggest trade blow that the United States has ever endured.
While Carney is measured, Freeland is urging retaliatory tariffs. Still, it could be advantageous for the Liberals to call an election.
But if Mark Carney recalls Parliament and manages to keep things going for 6 months, that just gives the Conservatives time to figure out how to respond to him. So another reason that the new Prime Minister, either Freeland or Carney, might want to go earlier.
The specter of an early election call has already shaken things up. The federal NDP is already warning their candidates and staff in a memo to be ready for a snap federal election. This month will likely see a flurry of nomination meetings for political parties gearing up for a possible spring election. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
So after weeks of tariff threats and more talk of Canada becoming the 51st U.S. state, politicians and pollsters are noting a surge in Canadian pride. As Liam Britton shows us, some stores are seeing it too.
Making America rich again.
After mounting tariff threats from the U.S., a wave of patriotism is surging over many Canadians.
Wave the flag.
Speaking of wave,
our phones are absolutely ringing off the hook. We haven't stopped. We're all kind of running around.
This flag maker says feelings of "Oh Canada" are having them "So Canada," a lot more than usual. Flying colors in Port Coquitlam has had a busy few weeks.
It's very exciting. It's a very proud moment to be able to supply flags and be a part of the process. I'm a very proud Canadian myself, so it's just an honor to be a part of it.
Including orders from outside the country.
It's been interesting to see more orders south of the border.
It's not just flag polls where this sentiment is being noticed, it's also in opinion polls. Recent surveys from Leger and Angus Reid found upticks in respondents saying they feel pride in Canada.
We are not interested in simply abandoning it and becoming the 51st state. That's really become clear, and Canadians are finding a voice in saying that out loud.
It's a sentiment politicians are hearing.
This is a response of Canadians who are saying, yeah, this is going to be tough, but we're going to double down on Canadian pride and standing up for each other.
And in Washington, where federal and provincial politicians are presenting a united front against tariffs, it's a sentiment being delivered to U.S. leaders.
I certainly raised with them the solidarity that we've seen across the country in terms of meeting this moment in a way that protects the sovereignty of Canada and protects our economic interests.
And Saturday is National Flag Day.
Just had a customer come in and bought a 6-foot telescopic pole with a 2-foot by 4-foot flag for their house, and they didn't have one before. So I think it's nice to see a lot of additions to flags on houses.
And speaking of new additions, on Wednesday afternoon, a member of Donald Trump's White House staff posted on X, claiming there's still no agreement Canada won't become the 51st state. Liam Britton, CBC News, Vancouver.
Here's a look at misty Lake Osoyoos, frozen over, at least in parts, after a deep freeze in the BC interior. But there's a change on the way for all parts of this province. Darius has your BC-wide weather forecast coming up. U.S. President Donald Trump has signed his plan to impose reciprocal tariffs on America's trading partners. He says it's fair to all, but as Paul Hunter explains, he also took aim at Canada again.
If by this point anyone doubted Donald Trump is a massive fan of tariffs, there's no denying it now. On top of the existing threats against Canada, Mexico, and China, with the stroke of a pen this afternoon, he's now effectively threatening to put tariffs on the whole world. Reciprocal tariffs, as they're known, a kind of tit-for-tat tax on other countries who have tariffs in place against U.S. goods. Trump's new tariffs would kick in after several weeks of study by his administration, unless the other countries eliminate their tariffs. The fear is that all of this will trigger a global trade war, but Trump's thinking, as with other tariff threats, is that it'll spur manufacturing in the U.S. and create jobs in the U.S. But critics insist the more immediate effect will be that prices for American consumers will simply go up. The tariff put on imports, then passed on to whoever buys them. Trump promised in the campaign to bring prices down. So far, that hasn't happened. And now this. He himself has acknowledged short-term pain for Americans, insisting that the long-term benefit is worth it. Bottom line, he seems to be all tariffs all the time right now. He's also almost all Canada all the time as well, or so it sometimes seems. Today, without prompting, re-raising the notion of Canada becoming the 51st state.
You know, we just don't need their product. And yet they survive off the fact that we do 95% of what they do. Their taxes would come down greatly. Their security would go up greatly. Amazing things happen to Canada. Why would we pay $200 billion a year in subsidies to Canada when they're not a state? You do that for a state, but you don't do that for somebody else's country. So I think Canada is going to be a very serious contender to be our 51st state.
As is his way, he hit on a number of other topics in the Oval Office today, including that he'd like to restart nuclear arms control negotiations with Russia and China, telling reporters he'd like to get to that after, as he put it, sorting out the situations in the Middle East and Ukraine. Paul Hunter, CBC News, Washington.
CBC News has obtained exclusive data that challenges claims Trump has made about the Canadian border. In fact, there's been a spike in the volume of U.S. drugs and guns seized at the border by Canada. Last year, Canada intercepted more drugs headed north than the U.S. caught headed south. JP Tasker explains why.
President Donald Trump says Canada is fueling the U.S. drug problem.
Canada's a very bad abuser.
But a CBC News analysis of border data shows Canada has reason to worry about what's coming in too. There's been a surge in the amount of drugs intercepted by the Canada Border Services Agency at the border.
It is a public safety and security emergency, not just in the United States. It's killing people here in Canada.
Drug seizures have doubled in the last 2 years, spiking from nearly 4 million grams to 8 million. Cannabis, heroin, cocaine, and crack, they're all up. And it adds up to a lot more than the 5 million grams the Americans grabbed last year on their side of the 49th parallel.
Why are we seeing such a huge increase?
We live next door to the largest weapons market in the world, the largest drug market in the world.
This border security expert says that during the pandemic, Mexican drug cartels moved some production to the U.S. That's now easier to smuggle into Canada. It's how you end up with a drug bust like this. 835 kilograms of cocaine, all traced to the U.S. And it's not just drugs. 9 in 10 guns taken by police in Toronto last year were from the States. Canada's border strategy can't just be about appeasing Trump, says this former national security advisor.
It's not just a matter of checking what's going out, but it's checking what's coming in. The border goes both ways.
The public safety minister says Canada has raised the rising influx of guns and drugs with the White House. The immediate concern, though, is a fentanyl crackdown to avoid tariffs.
We should be focused on eliminating the scourge that is fentanyl in this country and in the United States.
The CBSA just got a cash infusion of $1.3 billion, and it tells me some of that money will be put aside to cut off the flood of American drugs and guns. JP Tasker, CBC News, Ottawa.
Believe it or not, it has been 15 years since Vancouver and Whistler hosted the 2010 Winter Olympics. Its lasting legacy was to boost education, promote social inclusion, sustainability, and health along with fostering sports development. Just 2 years after the closing ceremonies, some promises were met, while others were left lacking. Let's take a look at a CBC story from 2012.
Canada's next big Olympic volleyball player?
Oh, yeah.
These summer campers are inside the Richmond Olympic Oval. But the only sign that this was once the 2010 speed skating venue is a mark that indicates the location of the old finish line. Now, the Oval is home to dozens of sports and many elite athletes, including the bronze medal-winning women's soccer team. It's a very visible legacy of the Vancouver Games. Right up there with the expanded sea-to-sky highway between Vancouver and Whistler, and the already at capacity Canada Line that runs from the airport to downtown. But a visible downside to Vancouver's Olympic dream is the former Athletes Village. Once $1 billion financial failure with City Hall on the hook, it's now on the verge of breaking even as the last building, Canada House, goes on the market.
A lot of residential looking down on the plaza.
Brent Totterin was Vancouver's planning director during the Olympics. For him, Olympic architecture is about long-term needs, not just iconic structures, such as Beijing's now debt-ridden Bird's Nest, or Montreal Stadium, nicknamed the Big O for the $1.6 billion bill that took 30 years to pay off.
You've got to think very carefully about whether or not the Olympics can be a catalyst for a stronger city at the end of the day, rather than just being a play for tourism dollars or some short-term attention.
You will come out of it with a massive financial hangover.
Chris Shaw was a determined anti-Olympic protester in the lead up to the Games, and one who still rails at the estimated $7 billion cost.
If you want to do those massive capital projects, they can be done without hosting this circus that really is for the developers who are wanting to develop their own private projects.
Public housing, though, is among those projects. 156 units for seniors and the homeless. A creative use of the prefab buildings from Whistler's Athletes Village.
What VANOC would have done with those boxes after the Games is simply fire sailed them to work camps in northern Alberta or northern BC.
Joining us now is Olympian Alexa Liu, who competed in the 2010 women's parallel giant slalom. She also competed in Turin in 2006 and now serves as a Richmond City Councillor. Councillor, thanks for being here. What runs through your mind listening and seeing that story?
When I think of it from my councillor hat on, I realize that sometimes the planning and the execution could have been done differently in how you partner with developers on building things. When I look at some of the other pieces, like our Olympic Oval, while it's not a speed skating venue, it was never meant to be. It is a fully activated space with, I think, 800,000 people go through there a year, all different ages, people from the old people coming to work out. There's a seniors day on Wednesdays where they get to work out and at a really reduced rate or free, I think, right now, to all kinds of kids activities. And we've got a number of Olympic and national teams training there. So climbers, volleyball, as well as para-athletes for wheelchair basketball and wheelchair rugby. So a number of different athletes are working out there. It's being extremely well utilized. And when we compare it to other communities that have had big Olympic infrastructure of sport facilities that ended up getting mothballed, I think we can feel proud that we transitioned it to a community facility with high performance. And it's something positive for me that I've seen in the community.
What about other centres like Hillcrest? We know that's a very busy centre. It was the curling venue in Vancouver, just outside the Queen Elizabeth Park.
Well, I know people who started curling because of the Olympics, and they curl out of there, and they've made friends and people they normally wouldn't have necessarily hung out with, and into a sport that they never thought of getting into. And I think it's really created ties in the community. And I think Hillcrest, you could probably stamp out a couple of more of those across the city, and they would be full overnight. You know, when you look at aquatic programs, people using the pool, people using all the different facilities, you know, people coming together and able to be active together. I think they're amazing. And, you know, up at Whistler, we've been utilizing, you know, the ski hill, the sliding center has been, it's reaching the end of its life, but it's had tons of activity in it, World Cups and other events, and we've seen lots of fun things happen. The Callahan Valley people are, I know lots of people that go up there cross-country skiing, and that's a new facility that people are able to use, and anyone can go and use. You know, learning how to cross-country ski is a very accessible thing to do. whether you're a sit skier or able-bodied, you can get out there and be out in the fresh air in a facility that is safe and has lots of snow.
If I can ask you to put on your athlete hat, what stands out for you looking back at your time competing in 2010?
Oh, well, the spirit and the camaraderie. And my favorite moment for me, of course, was watching my best friend, JCJ Anderson, compete in his 5th Olympics and finally win the Olympic gold medal. So for me, that was a pretty special moment. I wasn't able to win gold on my day, but the following day, back up on the hill and watching him race to gold, I thought that was pretty special.
Alexa Liu, Olympian, Richmond City Councillor, we appreciate your time and your perspective. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
After the break, a look out east. The snow has landed and it is messy. Much of southern Ontario and Quebec is under winter and storm and snowfall warnings. You'll want to see this. A memorial continues to grow in Surrey, where police shot and killed a teenager over the weekend. Tonight, his friends and family are gathering at that site of the confrontation to mourn him. The CBC's Janella Hamilton is live in Surrey's Clayton Heights area. Janella, what more have you learned about the teen who was killed?
Yeah, Dan, people just starting to show up for the vigil that is expected to start at 7 o'clock tonight. It was near this intersection at 185th Street and 70th Avenue where a teen, a grade 10 student, was shot and killed by RCMP officers. Now, the memorial here has been growing since Sunday. There are plenty of teddy bears and lots of flowers. We've seen teens stop by and lay even more flowers tonight. We can see people with candles, lighting candles. As well at the memorial, we can see notes that say, "We love you, we miss you." One note said the teen was very kind and polite and a sweet young man. Many, many teddy bears and pictures are here as well, and a few Hot Wheels as well. Now let's go back to Sunday. Police say it all started a couple blocks away at Clayton Heights Secondary School. Officers responded to a call about a person with a weapon in a schoolyard. Surveillance video seen by CBC News shows a person holding what appears to be a handgun, pointing it toward himself before pointing it at the direction of the officers. It was about a minute long of an interaction between police and that person. Shortly after, you can hear what sounds like 2 gunshots before several officers rush back into frame of the video, moving towards that person. The Independent Investigations Office of BC is investigating. On Tuesday, the IIO confirmed the victim was a youth, but did not provide any other details, including what the teen was holding. The IIO's chief civilian director said they're going to be investigating the shooting in a timely manner as soon as possible and find out whether police actions were necessary and reasonable. And I'm sure there are a lot of questions still lingering in the minds of family and friends who are gathering here tonight for the teen.
The CBC's Janella Hamilton in Surrey's Clayton Heights area. Janella, thanks. Atlantic Canada is being hit tonight by the same winter storm that just hammered Ontario and Quebec. As Nicole Williams shows us, it's left people digging out from up to 45 centimeters of snow, and officials urging everyone to stay safe.
The morning commute, a real slog. Some needing a helping hand. This one caught on live TV.
So people are trudging through it to get across the Oh, somebody just fell. Oh, no.
The storm touched down in southwestern Ontario Wednesday evening before sweeping its way east. More than 25 centimeters of snow fell in Toronto, more than 30 in Ottawa, up to 45 in areas close to Montreal. And snow is still falling in much of Atlantic Canada, some trying to use it to their advantage.
I thought this might be a bit faster than walking, but I don't know if it's going to be. It's more fun though.
Others just trying to survive it.
I think I'll be staying inside once I've got my Starbucks. I think I'll be hunkering down.
We're Canadians. Have to keep going.
Some attempting to do just that, but without much success.
This is a 2-person.
Many schools across Ontario, Quebec, and the Maritimes closed as roads became increasingly dangerous, leaving some buses in Ottawa stuck.
And then when he got stuck, I was like, I told myself. I knew it was going to happen.
Hundreds of flights across the country delayed or canceled. Passengers as far as Washington, Florida, and Cuba stranded. City crews now facing a mountain of cleanup.
We're full deployed with 1,000 workers, 1,000 trucks on the road.
But officials say finishing the job will take time.
We will need to continue to be plowing throughout the day and into Friday.
Officials are urging patience and safety first. Toronto police say they've responded to more than 100 weather-related incidents, and people in Atlantic Canada being asked to stay off the roads if they can. Nicole Williams, CBC News, Toronto.
That's a bit more than we got here on the South Coast, Darius Madavi. And we were digging out for a little while at least. It was a bit tough to get around, but that's quite something, isn't it?
Yeah, we've been dry for a while, but now we're getting snowy again. But you're right, nothing compared to what they're seeing over on the East Coast. We've seen that snow continue to move across Newfoundland. Now that's going to continue into tomorrow at around noon, and then it should really be tapering off. Some places we'll see that end earlier. We've had many warnings, freezing rain warnings, snow warnings, winter storm warnings, wind warnings, and there's more on the way because we have another low pressure system that's going to be coming in, spreading some more snow. Not quite as much this time around, but still some hefty snow coming again this weekend to eastern Canada. So again, we've got some snow coming our way, but be glad it's not that much. Here on the south coast and across southern BC, temperatures will slowly recover into early next week, and then we're going to start to see a bit of a transition. So here we go. We've got mostly sunny skies with some scattered cloud tomorrow afternoon, cloudy in the morning, and then clearing up a bit in the afternoon. Then as we get into Saturday, we start to see this next system roll in, the first one in a while. Things are going to start out pretty wintry. You can see that snow coming. And then as the day continues and as we get into the next couple of days, those freezing levels are going to rise. We're going to see more rain here in Vancouver. You can see that at the start of the day on Saturday, we're going to see a bit of a mix, especially up on the North Shore in terms of that wintry weather. But then it will quickly transition to being just rain as those freezing levels rise. And it's pretty much the same story across the South Coast. And then more rain will come on Sunday and then in and out throughout next week as well. Here we have the precipitation forecast across the province. You'll notice something pretty similar. Tonight we may have some flurries and into tomorrow morning, sneak into the southern interior and the southeast. And then that next system rolls in on Saturday, really spreading that bigger amount of precipitation and into the interior as well. So expect to see some snow there. Pretty much no matter where you are in southern BC, probably central BC as well. But this time it looks like the northeast will, for the most part, be spared the flurries that they have been getting already this week. They've been really the only ones, so it's a bit of a trade-off. In terms of those temperatures, we can see that those are coming down a bit up in the northeast, and then slowly in the south, they'll be recovering into early next week. Depending on where you are, they may be coming up faster than others, so just check your local, check it out to make sure that you're not going to be going out with the wrong outfit, ensemble, gear. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. Here we go. We've got those flurries happening in the south tomorrow morning, and then some snow, some sun coming later in the afternoon. And here's our 5-day forecast. Dan, we've got a little bit of sun tomorrow, and then the wintry weather, classic wintry weather for Vancouver returns.
We will be well outfitted. Thank you, Darius.
Thank you.
Up next, an old TVA that inspired the nation is brewing Canadian pride again 25 years later. You'll want to see and hear this.
Amid a looming trade war with the U.S., a TV ad for Molson Beer is brewing Canadian pride a quarter century after it aired.
The Star CBC host Jeff Douglas reflects on what the ad means now.
25 years ago, I was the Molson Canadian guy, and that commercial changed my life.
Hey, I'm not a lumberjack or a fur trader, and I don't live in an igloo or eat blubber or own a dog sled. And I don't know Jimmy, Sally, or Susie from Canada, although I'm certain they're really, really nice.
I remember when we ultimately we did the test, and then Molson decided, yeah, we're going to do the commercial. And I remember the day we shot the commercial, the VP of marketing at the time for Molson said, you know, we're going to ruin your life with this commercial. Glenn Hunt, who created the spot, he was the director, creative director at Ben Simon, Byrne and Darcy at the time. He said that I was the third person they saw. He said that it was the thank you ad lib at the end, thank you, that made him go, that is the guy. Laurie Estabrooks, who produced the spot, said it was because I had a wicked bad hockey haircut at the time. But the interesting thing about that commercial, and I think a big part of why it landed the way it did, is that it was ready in time for it to go on the wait list for the Oscars, for the Academy Awards that night. And so Molson did a media buy and got on the wait list. Robin Williams was hosting that year. He took the program long, and at a certain point, he did a performance of Blame Canada from South Park.
Now, blame Canada, blame Canada. It seems that everything's gone wrong since Canada.
Then they went to commercial break, and the rant came up. It was pure happenstance. Molson decided they wanted to go out and do live performances of this little speech. And so we ended up going out to, I think, Calgary, Edmonton, Ottawa, and then in Toronto, and culminated in a trip across the country on Canada Day, where I started at midnight in St. John's, Newfoundland, and made my way across the country. That tour was the first time I had ever seen Canada. And so that was really an introduction for me to the country, and I met an awful lot of people, and I drank a lot of beer with a lot of Canadians, and it really forged my relationship, I think, with this country and my love for the people of this country. In the year 2000, the feeling of Canadian pride was really high in this country. I got to see that firsthand. I got to see that openness, I guess, of Canadians. It was a remarkable thing to see that no matter how far apart we may be and how different culturally we may be, that at the end of the day, we are still so very, very similar. 2025 is a very different context than 2000. And I think that what we're seeing right now is that when someone outside of the country starts to take aim at us, we can close ranks very quickly. And that sense of identity and pride and love of this place and love of our neighbor comes right back to the fore. It's interesting that before I did this commercial, I had never really thought too much about being Canadian or patriotism, what Canada was. I ended up working for History Television and going into parts of this country in the West Kootenays or Churchill, Manitoba, Norway House, Manitoba, Joa Haven in Iqaluit, places that most Canadians never get to see. Meeting the people there, interacting with the people there, staying with the people in those places. Then I came to CBC and ended up having conversations with people across the country and around the world. And this has always led me to consider and reconsider and reevaluate who we are, or at least from my point of view, who we are and what we stand for as a country. And it is interesting for someone who lived the first 27 or 28 years of their life without really thinking about it, what a profound love I've come to have for this country. Not even so much for the country, because the country is sort of a weird esoteric notion for me, but for the people of this country. I know we have been far from perfect, and I know our past has been problematic and violent at times. I believe that we believe in the things we say we believe in. The power of the spot doesn't come from within the spot. It comes from the energy that is attached to the spot by the people who see it and the people who share it. I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised to see it come up, because there's something about it that has this quality. And then on another level, it's so far in my past. There's been so much water under the bridge that it's almost like it's someone else who's in it. But I also have to just shake my head and go, Joe, man, they can't kill Joe. Joe will not die. Although he is getting a little older looking, get a few more wrinkles and white hairs.
Good on you, Jeff. Good head.
Yeah. Who knew beer could bring people together?
Shocking.
Who would have guessed?
In this country?
Yeah. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, on YouTube, and our website, cbc.ca/BC.
And we will have your next local news at 11 o'clock, right after the National. Good night.